The New Frontier Hotel, Las Vegas, Nevada, April 23, 1956, 9:47 p.m. Elvis Presley walked off the stage of the Venus Room to the sound of polite, scattered applause that felt more like pity than appreciation. The 21-year-old who had been driving teenage audiences wild across America for the past 2 years had just experienced the most humiliating 45 minutes of his young career. Behind him, the sophisticated Las Vegas audience sat in uncomfortable silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Middle-aged couples in evening wear, high-rolling gamblers in expensive suits, and entertainment industry veterans who had come expecting another polished lounge act had instead encountered something they didn't understand and weren't prepared for: raw, sexual, rebellious rock and roll. Elvis stood in the wings, his hands shaking with a combination of adrenaline and embarrassment. For the first time in his professional career, an audience hadn't just been unresponsive, they had been actively hostile. During Hound Dog, several people had actually gotten up and walked out. During Don't Be Cruel, he had heard someone in the front row loudly say, "This is ridiculous." What Elvis didn't know, as he stood there trying to process what had just happened, was that he had just experienced what would later be recognized as one of the most important failures in entertainment history. The disaster at the New Frontier Hotel would teach him lessons about audiences, performance, and personal growth that would eventually transform him into the greatest live performer Las Vegas had ever seen. But that transformation would take 13 years, countless hours of soul-searching, and a complete reimagining of what Elvis Presley could become when he finally understood the difference between conquering an audience and connecting with one. This is the documented story of Elvis Presley's spectacular Las Vegas failure, his 13-year journey through the wilderness of Hollywood movies and personal growth, and his triumphant return to Vegas as the king, not just of rock and roll, but of Las Vegas entertainment itself. The roots of the 1956 disaster began with a fundamental misunderstanding of what Las Vegas represented in the mid-1950s entertainment landscape. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, saw Vegas as the ultimate symbol of show business success, the place where the biggest stars commanded the highest salaries and earned the respect of the industry. But Parker had misjudged both Elvis's readiness for Vegas and Vegas's readiness for Elvis. Las Vegas in 1956 was a sophisticated adult playground that catered to an older, wealthier clientele who came expecting polished professional entertainment. The city's showrooms featured crooners like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, comedians like Shecky Greene, and elaborate production shows with dancers and orchestras. Elvis Presley, with his leather jacket, his gyrating hips, and his raw sexual energy, was the antithesis of everything Las Vegas entertainment represented. He was young, rebellious, and dangerous in a town that valued smooth, safe, and sophisticated. The booking at the New Frontier was arranged by Parker as a 2-week engagement that was supposed to establish Elvis as a legitimate Vegas headliner. The money was good, $8,500 per week, more than Elvis had ever earned for live performances. The venue was prestigious, regularly hosting major stars and attracting influential audience members who could advance careers. But from the moment Elvis arrived in Las Vegas, everything felt wrong. The city's desert heat was oppressive. The casino atmosphere was alien to a young man from Memphis, and the showroom environment was completely different from the concert halls and auditoriums where Elvis had learned to command audiences. The Venus Room at the New Frontier seated 400 people at small tables arranged around an intimate stage. The lighting was dim and atmospheric, designed for cocktails and conversation rather than high-energy performance. The sound system was optimized for crooners and jazz singers, not rock and roll. Even the stage itself was wrong. Small, low, and surrounded by diners who were there as much for the food and drinks as for the entertainment. Elvis's first show on April 23rd was a disaster from the opening song. He walked on stage wearing his usual performance outfit, a pink shirt, black pants, and white shoes, and immediately felt the disconnect with his audience. These weren't teenagers ready to scream and faint at his every move. These were adults who had paid good money for dinner and a show and expected professional entertainment. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said into the microphone, his Memphis accent sounding thick and awkward in the sophisticated Vegas environment. "I'm Elvis Presley." The response was polite but cool. No screaming, no hysteria, no indication that these people had any idea who he was or why they should care. Elvis launched into Heartbreak Hotel, the song that had made him famous just months earlier. But in the intimate Vegas setting, his powerful vocal style seemed overwhelming and inappropriate. The song that had sounded revolutionary on radio and in concert halls sounded harsh and crude in the Venus Room's sophisticated atmosphere. As he moved into his trademark hip movements, Elvis could feel the audience's discomfort. What teenage audiences found exciting and liberating, this crowd found embarrassing and vulgar. By the time he finished the first song, Elvis knew he was in trouble. The rest of the show was a series of increasingly desperate attempts to connect with an audience that fundamentally didn't understand what he was offering. Elvis tried slowing down his delivery, eliminating his hip movements, even attempting some of the crooner-style songs that Vegas audiences expected. Nothing worked. The reviews the next morning were devastating. The Las Vegas Sun's critic wrote, "Elvis Presley's opening night at the New Frontier was amateurish and disappointing. His crude gyrations and primitive singing style are entirely unsuited to the sophisticated Las Vegas audience." The Las Vegas Review-Journal was even harsher. "Elvis Presley is dead on arrival in Las Vegas. His juvenile antics and sexual posturing are embarrassing to watch and insulting to the intelligence of adult audiences." But perhaps the most crushing review came from Variety. The entertainment industry Bible, Presley's Vegas debut proves that some acts simply don't translate to grown-up venues. His teenage appeal is lost on adult audiences who demand polish, professionalism, and sophistication. Vegas may have seen the last of Elvis Presley. The second week was no better. Audiences remained cold and unresponsive. Critics continued to pan his performances, and Elvis himself grew increasingly demoralized and confused. He had never experienced sustained rejection like this, and he didn't know how to process or respond to it. On the final night of his engagement, May 6, 1956, Elvis gave what many observers considered the worst performance of his career. He seemed defeated, going through the motions without energy or conviction. When it was over, he told Colonel Parker, "I never want to come back to this town again." Parker, however, saw the Vegas failure differently than Elvis did. While Elvis interpreted the rejection as proof that he didn't belong in sophisticated venues, Parker understood it as evidence that Elvis needed to grow as a performer and develop new skills that would allow him to succeed in all entertainment environments. "Vegas wasn't ready for you yet," Parker told Elvis after the final show, "and maybe you weren't ready for Vegas, but that doesn't mean you never will be." The Las Vegas failure had profound effects on Elvis's career and personal development. In the short term, it reinforced his focus on younger audiences and concert venues where his raw energy and sexual charisma were appreciated rather than criticized. But the experience also planted seeds of ambition and determination that would influence Elvis's approach to his career for years to come. He had seen what the pinnacle of entertainment success looked like, and he had failed to achieve it. That failure became a source of motivation that drove him to become a more complete performer. The 13 years between Elvis's Vegas failure and his triumphant return were filled with experiences that prepared him for what would become the greatest chapter of his performing career. His military service taught him discipline and maturity. His movie career, while often artistically frustrating, taught him about different types of audiences and how to modify his performance style for different settings. Most importantly, his marriage to Priscilla and the birth of his daughter Lisa Marie gave Elvis a deeper understanding of adult emotions and experiences that would inform his later performances. The young man who had been rejected by Vegas audiences in 1956 for being too juvenile gradually developed the emotional depth and artistic sophistication that would make him irresistible to those same audiences 13 years later. The idea of returning to Las Vegas came from Colonel Parker, who had never forgotten the potential he saw in Vegas entertainment for Elvis's career. By 1968, Elvis's movie career was declining, and Parker was looking for new opportunities to revitalize his client's career and earning potential. Parker's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of sending Elvis back to Vegas as the same young rocker who had failed in 1956, he would position Elvis as a mature entertainer who had evolved beyond his teenage appeal while retaining the energy and charisma that had made him famous. The venue Parker chose was crucial to the plan's success. Instead of returning to the New Frontier, where Elvis's failure was part of the venue's history, Parker booked Elvis into the International Hotel, a massive new resort that was redefining Las Vegas entertainment with its huge showroom and state-of-the-art production capabilities. The International Hotel's showroom seated 2,000 people, 5 times larger than the intimate Venus Room where Elvis had failed. The stage was enormous, with sophisticated lighting and sound systems that could accommodate the kind of high-energy performance that was Elvis's strength. But most importantly, the International represented a new type of Vegas entertainment that was moving away from the intimate cocktail lounge format toward spectacular concert-style productions that could appeal to broader, more diverse audiences. Elvis's preparation for his Vegas return was unlike anything he had ever undertaken. For months before the opening, he worked with vocal coaches to expand his range and develop his voice into a more mature, powerful instrument. He hired a full band and backup singers, rehearsing arrangements that would showcase his growth as a performer while honoring his rock and roll roots. The song selection was carefully crafted to demonstrate Elvis's artistic evolution. The show would include his classic hits, proving he could still deliver the energy that made him famous, but also newer material that showcased his maturity and emotional depth. Most importantly, Elvis approached the Vegas return with a completely different attitude than he had brought to his 1956 debut. Instead of trying to please an audience he didn't understand, he focused on sharing his authentic self with people who were ready to experience something real and powerful. July 31st, 1969. The International Hotel. 10:15 p.m., Elvis Presley walked onto the stage wearing a simple black suit. No cape, no elaborate costume, just the confidence of a man who had spent 13 years learning who he was and what he had to offer. The opening song was Blue Suede Shoes, and from the first note, everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't the nervous young man who had failed at the new frontier. This was a seasoned entertainer at the peak of his powers, commanding the stage with the authority of someone who had earned his place there. The voice was deeper, richer, more powerful than anyone remembered. The stage presence was magnetic but controlled, sexual but sophisticated. The connection with the audience was immediate and complete. For the next hour and 15 minutes, Elvis delivered a performance that redefined what Las Vegas entertainment could be. He sang his classic hits with new power and meaning. He performed contemporary songs that proved he understood the musical landscape that had evolved during his movie years. He talked to the audience with humor and warmth that revealed a personality that had matured far beyond his teenage rebel image. But most importantly, he performed with the kind of authentic emotional expression that Vegas audiences had never experienced from a rock and roll performer. When Elvis sang Love Me Tender, grown men cried. When he performed Suspicious Minds, the entire room was on its feet. The response was overwhelming. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Critics who had dismissed Elvis as a teenage fad wrote reviews acknowledging they had witnessed something unprecedented. The entertainment industry recognized that Elvis had not just successfully returned to Las Vegas, he had revolutionized what Las Vegas entertainment could be. The Las Vegas Review-Journal, which had savaged Elvis 13 years earlier, wrote, "Elvis Presley has returned to Las Vegas as a mature, sophisticated entertainer whose power and presence redefine what we thought possible in live performance." Variety, which had predicted Vegas had seen the last of Elvis, declared Presley's International Hotel debut establishes him as the greatest live entertainer of his generation and possibly the greatest Vegas performer in history. The success was immediate and unprecedented. Elvis's initial 4-week engagement was extended repeatedly as demand for tickets overwhelmed the hotel's reservation system. Celebrities flew to Vegas specifically to see Elvis's show. The entertainment industry acknowledged that something fundamental had shifted in live performance. But the real measure of Elvis's Vegas triumph wasn't the critical reviews or industry recognition, it was his own transformation from a performer who had been intimidated by Vegas audiences to an entertainer who made Vegas audiences feel privileged to witness his artistry. The difference between the 1956 failure and the 1969 triumph wasn't just about Elvis's growth as a performer, though that was certainly part of it. The real difference was about understanding the relationship between performer and audience in a way that creates genuine connection rather than mere entertainment. In 1956, Elvis had tried to impose his teenage rebel energy on an adult audience that wasn't ready for it. In 1969, he offered his authentic self to audiences who were hungry for real emotion and genuine artistry. The Vegas success established a pattern that would define the final 8 years of Elvis's life. He would perform regular residencies at the International Hotel, later renamed the Hilton, that would set attendance records, influence other performers, and establish Las Vegas as the premier destination for major live entertainment. Between 1969 and 1977, Elvis performed over 600 shows in Las Vegas, more than any other major entertainer in the city's history. His Vegas residencies generated more revenue than any other act in Vegas history, and established the template for how major stars could use Vegas engagements to maintain their careers while earning unprecedented income. But perhaps more importantly, Elvis's Vegas success proved that artistic growth and personal development could transform failure into triumph, that maturity and authenticity could be more powerful than youth and rebellion, and that the most meaningful success comes not from conquering audiences but from connecting with them. The young man who had walked off the New Frontier stage in humiliation in 1956 had become the mature artist who commanded the International Hotel stage with unprecedented power in 1969. The 13-year journey between those two moments represents one of the most remarkable personal and professional transformations in entertainment history. Elvis's Vegas triumph was more than just a comeback. It was proof that failure could be the foundation for unprecedented success, that rejection could motivate growth that leads to acceptance beyond anything previously imagined, and that the most authentic victories come to those who are willing to learn from their defeats. The king of rock and roll had become the king of Las Vegas not by changing his essential nature, but by developing his authentic self into something powerful enough to command respect in the most demanding entertainment environment in the world. The disaster at the New Frontier had taught Elvis that success isn't about imposing your will on audiences. It's about offering your authentic self in ways that allow audiences to connect with something real. When Elvis finally conquered Las Vegas, he did it not as the young rebel who had failed there 13 years earlier, but as the mature artist who had learned that true power comes from authenticity. True charisma comes from confidence, and true success comes from the courage to be completely yourself, even when that self is different from what you once were. The greatest comeback in entertainment history wasn't just about returning to a place that had rejected you. It was about returning as the person you were always meant to become.